Friendly Neighborhood PhD, and you're listening to the TyePod.
It's really great to have you, Clarissa, on the show, and I definitely look forward to learning about your story and everything. And you've got really cool things going on.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was thinking, just kind of as an icebreaker, like do you have a theme song or a song that resonates? And is it the same one that you had maybe years ago, or has it evolved over time?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
My family a couple years ago, every single one of us, siblings and my parents, all made playlists, and my nieces and nephews, and we like sent them to each other, and we didn't have to explain our playlist, but it was the playlist of our life. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really fun to learn about my siblings through music. Music is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a language for me. It's a way of speaking. It's an emotion evoker. And as a lifelong dancer, like it truly is a way of how I communicate to others. So I love music. I actually have different songs for different emotions I need
Mm.
to bring up. If I need to calm down, if I need to chill out, if I need to rev up,
Right.
and I looked through some of my playlists this morning. And in fact, I pulled one up so that I
Mm.
could make sure I was prepared for this.
Nice.
Um, Overall, I think one of my theme songs would have to be Unstoppable by Sia.
That's a good one. Yeah.
She says, I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. Like I'm invincible. And that has been a song that has held me through so many trials that I have been through in the past couple of years. If you were to take me back to, the time in my life where I was a teenager and music was very impressionistic on me, my theme
Hmm.
song would probably have to be Punk Rock Princess by Something Corporate.
Okay. I haven't
I
heard
was
that one.
I was kind of I loved the punk scene,
Yep.
and my friends would always joke that I could go from punk to princess in a snap, which is, kind of, I mean, still very much me.
Yep.
I'm very driven, but yet I'm very soft, and so there's a couple for you.
Right. That's perfect. That's really good. I think that you're right that it is a language, and it resonates in so many different like parts of our lives. Like I've found that music it's been very different, as I've grown up, and like now that I connect with more lyrics, than I used to as a kid and everything. So like
Yeah.
that, yeah, it's really cool that you're talking about the playlist here and like sending them back and forth, because I think, you learn more about even the people closest to you through their playlists too. So that's very cool. I like that.
Yeah, when I originally sent that out to my family, my brother texted me and he's like, I learned so much about you by listening to what you loved
Yeah.
and what made a difference in your life.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always fun to add like some new content in, mix in,
Yes.
and
Yep.
like I don't know if you've seen on Spotify where it has these mixes where it takes like your like two people's taste and tries to blend it or something. But that's
That's so
that's really
cool. It's
fascinating.
amazing.
Yeah.
I love AI and technology tools that create wonder and awe
Mm,
for human beings.
That's the real purpose I think that it should be used for, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's
Excuse
really
me.
great. But I wanted to lead in with a little bit of your like general backstory, and I know that you have PMDD and celiac recently, and so like I wondered if you could kind of share a little bit about what those are and kind of your general like pathway to diagnosis with those.
Yeah, absolutely. I have learned throughout my life that the most impactful people take their mess and make a message out of it. And that is truly what I have lived my life trying to do. Um, PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it is an abnormal reaction to normal shifting hormones for feminine cycles.
Mhm.
And I started having symptoms at the age of 10, but I was not diagnosed until I was 29.
Okay.
And the diagnosis didn't even actually exist until I was probably 26 or 27. So
Mhm.
it was a good timing because before that there was no help for me.
Okay.
Um, Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, being that abnormal reaction, it's considered a mood disorder or a hormonal disorder. And some of the symptoms, I am lucky, I guess, or blessed that I have pretty much everything across the board. So physically, my body, as your hormones get really high right before your period starts,
Mhm.
I get physical symptoms of achy joints. My gums bleed a lot.
Okay.
Uh, my vision kind of gets blurry, like I have to use my glasses a lot more. Other physical symptoms like just a lot of inflammation in the body,
Mhm.
and so I have to slow down. I'm tired more. I crave sleep. I kind of want to hibernate. At the same time, there is this explosion of with that inflammation, there is a need to how do I want to say this? Control or continue staying constant in the energy levels that I was.
Mhm.
And so then there's this fighting in your body of like, well, I need to work out and I could yesterday. And how come I can't today? Um,
So you can't
and
really get like a routine or anything much the way
yes,
it's, yeah,
it's
yeah,
very, it makes you very inconsistent as a person. Even, showing up to work or showing up for my family looks really different because, suddenly I go from having full energy to having no energy. Um, when it comes to emotional symptoms, it's actually even more severe than the physical.
mhm,
And some of those symptoms are incredibly intrusive thoughts, feelings and emotions and thoughts that you would be better off gone or, alone. And it goes all the way into suicidal ideation and suicidal planning, which is, I mean, us doing this podcast right after International or National Suicide Awareness Day, like
right,
this is big for me. And that lasts about 10 days. And it
mhm,
gets to the point where, I mean, the only thing I can do is lay on the ground and not do anything, because if I try to do anything, I will feel anger and aggression because it's against what I want to do, or I'm not doing it the right way,
mhm,
as well as the inflammation in your body. I just have like less capacity, and I don't want to do anything that will harm anyone.
mhm,
And
right,
I mean, it can become that severe. I have had multiple teams of doctors who have listened to me, and I promise I have shopped for them. I've shopped for doctors to find a good team and get to a point where it's definitely manageable, but it
mhm,
definitely still interrupts my life
right.
every
And
month.
do you feel like you found a team that has helped you sort of figure out how to manage it as, as good as possible?
Yeah. So when my youngest daughter was born, she'll turn 11 in 2 months.
Mhm,
And when she was born, about 2 weeks later on Black Friday, I went into severe suicidal ideation with PFDD. And I was
mhm,
packing my bags, telling my husband that his life would be so much better without me because I was the problem.
mhm,
And he saw it for what it was. And he said, no, we're going to get you some help before you make that decision. He was so good about it. And so we started searching for a therapist who could help me, and then also a primary care doctor who could help me. And it takes a couple tries to find someone. So
right.
it took a while. I mean, it took me 3 or 4 months before, with doctor's appointments every week, before I found somebody who listened, who said, yeah, this sounds abnormal.
Mhm.
Like,
And
and
there were
that,
probably some that wrote off like what you were
oh,
describing and
I was told this was all in my brain. I was told that I just need to put on my granny panties
mm,
and get to work. I was told that if I exercised or ate better, I was told that there's nothing they could do, or, take this medication and call me in 2 weeks and tell me how you feel.
mhm,
And that is hard. I think that's the hardest thing is you come away from a doctor who's supposed to be your trusted source.
right. And they're supposed to be the expert and you just, I mean, it has to like it pulls you down so much.
Yeah. So you have to build a resilience up to,
Right.
why am I doing this? Am I important enough that,
Mhm,
this needs to happen, as well as like having a companion, a
mhm.
friend, a spouse, a sister, a brother, a parent
That support
who,
network that, yeah.
yes, can go with you, talk to you, listen to you, support you in that journey. Like those are essential for
Mhm,
success.
mhm. Right. Yeah. And I just can't help but, things from my experience with disability and everything in my disease, like without a support system like that, I just don't know how would have carried on, and it sounds like that's been your support system too. Like they've made it where it's possible to kind of get, to a point where maybe not everything is perfect, obviously, but like you can be as much of who you want to be as possible.
I think that that's one thing that I would tell anybody listening to
Yeah.
this is, when you have a support system, they are not the workers, you are. It is not a victim mentality. It is, I am going to conquer this. I might need to set the burden down for a little bit or rest, but this is on me. Like it truly is something that I'm responsible for, to get some help with that,
Right. Right. That's a really good point. Yeah.
so that you're not depleting those resources because they're getting burnt out.
Right. And that's the thing too. I mean, like the burnout does affect, those around you a lot. And that's something that, I think many of us I try to be aware of, but at times I find that I need to be more aware of it, so
Yeah.
that's a good point. And
So, oh, go ahead.
no, I'm just curious, like when you were going through your process on finding doctors and therapists, like my experience with therapists, I still haven't found one that can relate or understand enough of
Okay.
my
Yeah.
specific things. Like what was that like for you with, with your symptoms and everything, like finding a match that actually fit?
Yeah, well, growing up, so I told you my symptoms started at 10, and
Right.
I mean, I look at my daughter who is 10 right now,
Mhm,
and if she were going through those same suicidal ideations that I
mhm,
was going through at 10, like as a mother, like that would be so hard.
at
And
such a young
I have
age.
to recognize like my parents did the best that they could
Mhm,
in a time when mental health really wasn't even a topic of discussion.
mhm,
So, and that might date myself. We're so lucky that we have so many more resources. But, this is like chemical. This is something. So I had a therapist.
mhm,
I was really grateful that in my neighborhood, there was a gentleman who was a therapist, and my mom went and saw him for a couple of sessions
mhm.
to get some help with her marriage. So when I was struggling, my mom thought, well, he helped me. Why don't I, maybe see if he could help Clarissa? And so I actually had a therapist from the age of like 12 to 16. And he was wonderful. He was great. He helped me out a lot. He didn't solve things because at that point I was told, look, your body's just developing. You're a teenager right now. When you're in your 20s, this will for sure go
Mm,
away.
mhm.
And so I had hopes of that. So, I'm excited to work with the doctor. He's helping me out. Teenagehood years are hard anyway.
True, that's true.
Right? They're so messy.
Mhm,
And I have hopes that I come out on the other side. And I have to admit, like my senior year in high school, my first year of college were like great. They were kind of years that I was a little bit more in charge of myself. So I could rest when I needed to, I could take breaks when I needed to without realizing that I was doing that. It was very
mhm.
intuitive. But then when I got to college and started having heavier responsibilities, those symptoms came back even more. So I would say somebody who increases in anger, frustration, aggression during certain periods in their cycle, like
Mhm.
for a female, they might want to keep track of that because it
Yeah,
might be that when their hormones shift, they just have a smaller cup. I tell my girls, I have like a 32-ounce cup normally, and all my stress can fit in it.
mhm,
But on a day when I wake up and I have a shot glass, all of that water cannot fit in there and
right.
it overflows. And that truly is kind of what PMDD feels like.
Mhm.
So, being able to like change the size of my glass or change the amount of stressors I have really made a difference. But as I've gotten into an adulthood and, I have kids and those stressors are there. Like
Right.
I didn't have quite that flexibility. So when I started looking for a doctor, I actually called my therapist from my teenage years and asked for a recommendation.
Wow, okay.
And so I feel like I'm a Christian. I have very heavy Christian beliefs. I feel like God planted that seed so early in my life so I could pull on it later.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that was very helpful. Now I go to therapy, we talk about things, but I was not diagnosed for another 2 years. And how my diagnosis came about is probably how most people find theirs now. Couldn't sleep. That's also a sign of PMDD, heavy
Mhm.
insomnia. I'm down on Google typing like all my
Right.
symptoms, and
Mhm.
I find like a back end feed that people are asking questions and answering them like a forum. And I see PMDD, in somebody's chat, like, have you considered this? Here's this website. And it was like this like rabbit hole that I went
Uh-huh.
down. And the next morning I told my husband, I said, I think I found it.
Wow.
So
Well,
I
that's really
took,
great. That,
yeah,
like, so often I think with the Google thing of, like, trying to diagnose our own symptoms and everything, sometimes it doesn't lead to the best places, but, the fact that you did kind of a deep dive and you're like, "Well, oh, okay, that looks like it could be it," you kinda did it in the right way, like a just, like, looking for clues to, like, how
yeah.
yeah,
And I
how
have to tell you, it was hours, like
uh-huh.
multiple nights of searching. It was not this one time, well, I think I'm going to die. It was like hours of finding the right thing and making sure that it felt right to me. That was
Mhm,
important.
mhm,
But I took that to my therapist and I said,
mm,
what do you think about PMDD? And he's like, well, I don't even know what that is. And
mhm,
so he looked in the DSM-5 and realized that that was new to that version of the DSM-5 that had just come out about 2 years
mhm.
before I came into his life. And he said, absolutely, this is exactly what you have.
Wow, okay. Is that something that is it genetic? Like, how do you
Yeah.
basically
So
get that?
PMDD, there is no known
Uh-huh.
cause and there is no known cure.
Wow, okay, so just
But
kind of
the
random.
stats, yeah, the stats say that 1 in 5 women have PMDD and
Mhm.
about 80% go undiagnosed.
Wow, that is high. That's a high rate. So,
That is so high.
and it's still, I mean, it's still obviously relatively new, just the knowledge of it at this point. So, like, what does a treatment regimen look like with
Oh,
that? Like,
that's such a good
what's
question.
yeah.
Learning from people over the past 10 years, it looks different for everybody because everybody comes with different, I guess you could say, big T traumas and little T traumas of
I
their
know
life,
about those.
right?
Yep.
And so that affects how we interact with the world, and that affects how our body interacts with the world. So even though there's the same symptoms of this abnormal reaction to hormones, the cause, they're still trying to figure it out. Since I was diagnosed, they actually went from just PMDD to now there's this spectrum. They're called premenstrual disorders and there's severe PMS. So just like your normal PMS, but a little bit stronger. Then there's what's called PME, where that's called premenstrual exasperation, where let's say I have bipolar disorder And now you throw shifting hormones on top of that. It makes my bipolar disorder more severe during certain times of the month.
Okay.
So that's something that they're dredging out. Like, well, this lady had OCD before she was diagnosed with a premenstrual disorder, and it gets so severe those 10 days before her period starts. Now we know that's PME versus like, I had nothing. No, I really don't have traumas in my life that are extremely severe. And I mean, maybe little experiences, which I think most of us have living, just being human in this world.
True.
But, you know, it is definitely when my body started shifting into development, when my hormones kicked on, like that is exactly when I started having issues. Up until then, I had, you know, no problems like that. So now, and then they have that PMDD. So now it's this spectrum. So that, I mean, it's been so cool to watch the science explode around women's health. And then on top of it, now I don't know where, you know, if you've seen this, but just being a female, like now every post is about like perimenopause and the hormones in women's older ages,
Mhm.
which now I'm going through. So navigating PMDD through perimenopause as well. So like it is totally expanding into a spectrum, and
Right.
it's pretty incredible that we have
It,
sciences like that.
it is, you know, it's fascinating to see, like, just in general, the branches sort of, you know, of all the different diagnoses that are out there. And you're right, like the same diagnosis even can look very, very different for, you know, for like two different people. And
Yeah.
it's like you said, you know, it's like the different traumas, experiences, environmental effects going on, you know, like there's so many factors, and it is a spectrum now. I feel like with almost every disorder, it seems like these days.
And every human.
Yeah, yeah. And so I guess going back to kind of like your day to day and managing it now, like what does that look like? Can you have an idea, like schedule wise, you know, like I
Yeah.
can, you know, preemptively like plan for this and handle it and everything, like,
Yeah, so let's talk like wide view and then go down
yeah,
into my view. So
okay.
wide view, an SSRI, those can be helpful.
Mm.
So an antidepressant medication to just help your serotonin reach your brain more efficiently. Whether that's your body makes enough, you know, doesn't make enough or makes it, but your body doesn't use it, like that tends to be helpful to just kind of kickstart keeping your uh, you a little bit more constant, right?
Mhm.
So for me, I take medications only 2 weeks out of every month.
Okay.
And then the second part of that is cognitive behavioral therapy or dialect behavioral therapy. Those two types of therapy have been very successful in PMDD, helping women notice their disoriented thoughts and being able to sort through like, okay, that's not something I normally would think or something a normal human would think. So therefore, I might be in a time when the PMDD is going to start getting louder,
Mhm.
and I need to be careful of that. Um, and then helping to process the honestly, I think PMDD is a trauma to the body every single month. It puts your body through a lot. And so to be able to process that trauma that it comes and goes like a wave, like that's really hard versus like one time and I made it through my dark days, like, but to know it's coming again, it can be really tough. And then the third part about that is your lifestyle, exercise, nutrition, as
Mhm.
well as for any female. And if any female has ever been to a doctor, they always ask, when was the start of your last period? Like we have
Mhm.
to track our cycles. So tracking your cycle is essential to understanding who you are and what your body's trying to tell you. I was a women's health coach for 10 years,
Mhm.
and I taught my clients that your cycle is a report card of what is going on in your life
That's a good way to put it.
because our bodies react to everything we're going through. And so you have to be able to read your body. And that's a great way for a female to read her body as her cycle because it's so reactive to our environments.
Right, right.
So medication, therapy, and lifestyle are the biggest parts of that. Now, how that works together for you um, can be, you know, different.
Right.
And then there's
Definitely.
ultimately, you can go the route of having what's called a complete hysterectomy, where they take out the ovaries that produce female hormones, female sex hormones. But sometimes when you do that, there's a whole nother realm of symptoms that then you have to deal with. So
Right.
there's a devil on both sides of the coin, and you have to be able to know yourself and know what you need enough and do enough research and education for yourself to be able to make that decision.
Right, right. And then, I mean, if you go that route, you're talking about a whole different thing
Yeah.
with, you know, procedures and surgeries. And then, you know, like there's other factors that are involved when you know, when you have something that invasive too.
Yep.
So, you know, you're right. It is case by case, it sounds like, you know, which is obviously like many other, you know, chronic illnesses and diseases out there. So it's so hard, you know, that there's not a one size fits all, so to speak, you know, solution. So, yeah,
And having PMDD, having that be something super cyclical, you have to be in tune
right.
and listen to what your body's telling you. And I think anybody with any sort of disability that still allows for cognitive function, you are aware of that because you have something going on inside that nobody else, a lot of the times, nobody else can really see.
Mhm.
And you are in charge of being the advocate for that.
Right, right. I mean, that's the ultimate like self-advocacy, and figuring out how, I mean, in the end, it is, you, when you do have that cognitive, ability, that's on you to figure out how to make it work, that's
And
pressure
that's
for
hard.
sure. It
That's
is,
hard.
it
I mean,
is.
sometimes there are so many times when I have felt completely helpless or I'm at the end of my rope. I mean, thankfully, I've had my faith, my beliefs that I'm here for a purpose, my belief that I can make an impact, on the world and my desire to, as well as I would have to say, it's coming down into a tighter regimen for me. I'm really careful to never relax on my preparations for when the bad days come.
Mm, right.
So when I'm feeling good, I take time to prepare mentally, physically, like I will meal prep. I will spend more time with my kids and make sure that they know that I love them because
Just not taking that time for granted.
yes, yes, or not addressing the trauma that happened, the last time I had PMDD. Like I know I have to sit down and journal out what happened, what I went through, what I could do better, what resources could I have pulled from, because only I know the type of thoughts that are going through my head. And I have to be
True.
really honest with that and not set it aside.
Right. Right. No, that's, I think that is a really good thing to keep in mind, always, is that, there are the good days, but you need to, make sure that you like make the most of those, use the tools that you have that work, not basically not let up and, and pretend like it's not going to come back, and it's hard to have to, repeatedly get ready for that, I would imagine. Um, yeah.
Um, there's usually about 3 days where everything kind of comes to a peak. And those
Okay.
days in it, for my perspective inside my body, everything is just dark.
Yeah.
And I want to be careful because these could be trigger points for other people. And
Right.
I would want people to know there is always light at the end of the tunnel
Mhm.
and that I am living proof that you can choose to stay even when things get dark over, multiple times in your life. That does not mean you have failed. That does not mean you don't have worth. That is the point in time where you have a choice to. What I teach now is to be a builder or a destroyer. Like, okay, I've been handed this circumstance. I'm not happy with it. Am I going to build with it to make things better, or I'm going to destroy with it and be bitter about it?
Right, right. And like during those 3 days where it does kind of reach a peak, like how do you um work with like your family and your close like support network to make sure, that they kind of know what's going on and they're,
Mm.
taking care of it, also you as well. That seems like a balance that you would have to
That's so good for
uh
me to share because it is never just you.
mhm.
Whether you're an employee, whether you're a family member, it's never just you, and your actions will affect other people.
Mhm.
So my family, I have 3 daughters that are 17, 14, and almost 11.
Wow.
And when I know PMDD is coming, because I'm so blessed that I can be like, it's next week on Thursday. That's a huge blessing for me
It
because I've tracked
is.
it
Yeah.
so much. But I will tell them, all right, things are going to get rough for me. I'm going to have a shot glass of capacity, and so I need you to make sure that you help out with meals, that you help keep the house clean, and that if I need to take a nap, you're willing to step in. Like if I need to rest, you're willing to step in. For me, I've also learned with like my husband specifically, I can never assume that he knows where I'm at in my cycle. I always have to communicate with him.
Mhm, mhm.
I can never assume that he'll just pick up on my unread messages of distress.
So that communication is, I mean, you have to
Yes.
maintain that. Yeah.
And honesty is the best. Like, I didn't go into huge details with my daughters when they were
Mhm,
younger. I would just
mhm.
say, look, I'm going to be really tired next week. And can you just help me out? Because it's going to be a really rough week for me. And they're
Mhm.
so good with that. Now that they're older and they
You can
have
start
their own
explaining more details,
cycles,
probably.
like
Yeah.
they know very much what PMDD is and they're very aware of it. And I'll say next week's PMDD and they know all about that. And with my husband, I'll have to say, like, all right, next week is coming.
Mhm,
Can you step in? Where can you step in? How can you help me out? Let's look at the schedule. And we truly make time for that. And it's so inconvenient. And it
mhm.
frustrates me every time that I have to talk about my problems, right? Or
Right.
my issues, because nobody wants to talk about those.
Right.
It's
Right.
so
And then to have to
vulnerable.
repeatedly do it, over and over
Yes.
again. Yeah.
Right.
That has
But
to be
if
hard.
I don't, there is resentment that's built, and that is the last thing I want in my relationships because that's what
Mhm,
destroys relationships.
mhm.
So, being super honest with my family and even with my friends, they'll text me, "Can you get together?" And I'll say, "Nope, it's PMDD." And the fact
Right.
that I've shared my disability with people
Yeah.
allows other people to then have grace. If I don't share it, if I don't share my story, nobody's going to know.
Right. That's right. And I would imagine that your friend relationships too are probably better and stronger because of that,
I would hope so.
communication. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if they're not, you probably, that I know that over the years that sometimes, you kind of have to push some people out that don't, understand, or they don't have empathy for that situation. So
Yeah,
it's,
with the disability, you truly find out who's a true friend.
that's for sure. And in my experience, it doesn't take many either. Like you have those two or three, that you go to, and then your family, and like that's, if they're strong, bonds, and you have that support system, it's good. Like it will
Love
help
that.
you make it, through what's going on every month, basically. So I would imagine too, like a silver lining maybe of having 3 daughters is that they're able to help you explain to your husband, or navigate, each time that's coming around, especially now as they're getting older and know more about it. Does that seems like maybe a silver lining of, kind of having a closer knit family structure too, or something? If has that been kind of your experience too?
Yeah. There have been seasons
Mhm.
where my PMDD has gone left unchecked, or I get tired of it and it causes a lot of destruction in lives.
Mhm.
And, I don't communicate as well. And, with my brothers maybe, or my parents, and they wonder why I've been so secluded,
Yeah.
or friends, or I've lost friendships over it. And that's painful.
Mm.
There's a lot of grief with any sort of disorder or disability,
Yeah.
because there will be people who don't understand, and there will be people who you lose because of it.
That for me is the hardest part to, sort of navigate through, is when those changes happen, when, when you think that is a bond that's going to persist and stay there, and then it shifts in some way, like that seems like I sure don't have a good way to handle and process that, and that's a really difficult part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just never stop educating yourself.
Yeah.
Never stop learning about the newest sciences and the newest procedures and the newest,
Mhm.
study that they're doing, or if they need participants in a study. Like, those things
Mhm.
are. That's why I love social media, because I get
Yeah.
to find out about a lot of those things through groups that I'm in, support groups that I'm in, or that I run, for PMDD.
Uh-huh.
Celiac disease, of like learning, like, okay, they have found that it's this gene, or they're
Yeah.
looking at this medication. That's really important as well.
Has social media, like, has that all along kind of been something you've gravitated towards as it's sort of advanced and become a bigger thing?
I actually am going to tell you, I don't feel like I'm very good at social media.
Yeah.
And I think because PMDD has caused me to be very wary of what I share and
Right.
how I share it. My
Which,
story is
yeah,
not one to put on stories. My story is to talk more like this,
the one-on-one type of conversation.
deeper,
Yeah.
one-on-one, long term. Because if somebody swipes through real quick and they hear, suicidal ideation, and they go AWOL thinking I'm not safe, they don't understand that whole thing, right?
Right. Right. You don't have any, I mean, it's not an accurate picture of the story at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, as I have shared my story and done it in the right way, the right people have heard and found me. And I cannot
Yeah.
tell you how many people my being vulnerable and sharing my story has affected. And women who are like, I would have had no idea. And I can't believe how different my life is now. Or, even just last week, I had somebody reach out and say, I listened to a podcast you did 5 years ago. Can you update me on
Mhm.
what you've done since? As well as Facebook community groups can be magic,
Mhm. Mhm.
but they can also be very detrimental, because you're listening to all these
Right.
people validate the problems that you're having.
Right. And sometimes
That is,
that's like a lot of pressure too added on when I mean, you learn about so many things everyone else is going through and navigating. It's just like there's a huge amount of weight there too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have definitely sometimes had to put things on mute, as I haven't been healthy. At
Right.
the same time, I recognize that how I was brought up in needing to communicate very well. My parents are huge communicators,
Mhm.
and they taught me kind of business structure. I
Yeah.
come from entrepreneurs, that it's really important to be very clear and very concise, and state what you need. And so being able to have that tool, most people who have PMDD do not stay married.
Mhm. Okay.
It is that detrimental to relationships, that unknown and wishy-washy. And I just feel sometimes when I read other people's stories, like, why me? Why was I so blessed to have the outcome that I have?
Mhm.
Um, Even though, I have like the most severe of symptoms, like, how did I get so blessed to have a spouse who is still by my side, and daughters who are still so caring, and we have
Mhm.
such great relationships, thick or thin?
Mhm. Mhm. That really is. I mean, that's so great that you have that. You've navigated to this point through of it, and it's not to say there's not going to be more challenges. And obviously it's
Yeah.
repetitive, but at the same time, kind of being in the moment, realizing like where you're at and, what you do have, that's really, really important thing to mention.
Yeah. What I would tell people about social media, here's like my advice for your listeners. You have to know who you are and what you stand for before you speak. And because there are going to be people who try and shift your opinions or who
Right.
don't understand you. And when you do that in not a mean way or prideful way at all, it is a way of like, I have chosen to be a victor over my disorder. I will win. I am determined. I have chosen to be the person who stays, the person who lives, so that there is living proof. And that message must come through my messages on social media more than
Mhm.
anything else.
Mhm, mhm. You're right, and it's not a casual like social media account. When you're approaching it in that way, when you're sharing something personal with the disorder or whatever, like that, like your character is a lot more important in that
Yeah.
case, and being kind of in public. Like you're right, that's really good advice to share.
Yeah. And I use it as a tool for connection
Uh-huh.
and not a place to vent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing too. I know that it is easy, and like there are places like maybe even in the group chat or with one or two
Yep.
people maybe you connect with that you can do some of that, but it's knowing how much, to share, what content to make, and like making sure that it's not triggering, like you said. There's just so many factors to consider there.
Yeah, and I would hope that people reading my content or listening to my podcast would feel like they were seeing somebody so authentic.
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
you and I were talking about before, very little edits on our podcasts,
mhm.
pictures every once in a while showing like, yeah, I've been in bed all day.
Yeah, I have a few
And
of those.
I might show you pictures that I went to an event last night and showed up like a queen, but the results of that were that I was in bed for the next 24 hours because I made the decision to show up.
Right, right. That's good to share, though. I think
And
that
being
it's not
realistic that
always
way,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but also showing like, let's normalize that a lot. Not everybody can go full steam all the
Right,
time.
right. And I mean, that's not to say that you can never do it and highlight when you do, but also, for me, I like the authentic, organic way of saying, well, there's a cost, to do that. Whether you look at it like the shot glass or like the spoon theory, it's like
Yep.
whatever. But it's knowing a little more about the well-rounded person as a whole, I think is important to me, to kind of show that. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So that was at 29 that I finally got a diagnosis. So
Uh-huh.
it's been 10 years. In the past 10 years, it started, well, it was a little bit before that I started health coaching, but I
Mhm.
have been a female women's hormone health coach because of that. It led me to help so many women and connect with people who are going through the same thing as me. The other part of that is through sharing my journey, I actually found a hormone specialist who is only like 6 miles from me.
Yeah.
And she has literally saved my life by being a specialist towards hormones. So if there's females out there listening thinking like, oh, I get anger and aggression, I have very severe PMS, finding a specialist versus an overall doctor is actually really important nowadays for any sort of disability.
And
So
it's probably not easy.
no, and I will tell you, it is not cheap either. And you have to understand that the cost of that can be extreme. Now, thankfully, mine's not going to put me out of house and home.
Mhm, mhm.
That's not what I'm saying. But it stretches our family enough that we had to make a decision if that was so important to us.
Wow.
But
Okay. So
we
that's
had
not
been through,
something
yeah,
insurance would help cover
no,
then.
I
Wow.
pay out
Okay.
of pocket. Some people, their insurance will cover it, but I pay out of pocket. I save money every single month to make those payments. And, we made sure we exhausted every resource that was inexpensive
Mhm.
before we went to anything that cost money. And once I did that and shopped for the right person,
Mhm.
right? Free consultations are great. Phone call conversations are great,
Right.
web conversations. You kind of know if you're going to mesh with somebody. That's number one. And then number two, if you've done the research, like the questions that I can ask you are going to be very specific.
That's
And if
true.
you say, oh, that's not important, but I know how important it is, nope, you're not the
That's
right
not a
doctor.
match, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So I found this doctor, which I could totally, I could give you her name and you can put
Sure.
it in the show notes
Absolutely.
for women who have PMDD or any sort of premenstrual disorder. But she actually had helped me out. That was last August. And I have been working with her for a year.
Mhm.
I have never felt so good, even with PMDD still coming and going. But I feel like she has maybe cut my symptoms in half and has helped me create a manageable life. And so I'm very grateful for her. And I recognize that not everybody has access to that, but it's a good thing to know that people exist who can help you and to never stop.
Well, and I was going to say, like, don't quit searching for that right match and right specialist if you don't have one, until there is a match. I think
Yes.
it's easy to get discouraged when you're not finding, help in the places that you feel like you should, and then when you finally find that person that gets it, like it's so worth it, I think.
Yeah. So for
Yeah.
your listeners, I mean,
Yeah.
that was almost 30 years of searching for an answer.
Exactly.
And I'm not cured, but it's definitely to a point where I have never felt so good. So there is hope.
That's so great. Yeah, no, definitely. I'll share that information too, and on the contact. So, I did want to ask you just a little bit about how you got into the whole Mrs. USA pageant thing, and everything. And I see your crown and the banner back behind. And so I have to ask you a little bit about that and what that experience has been like.
I would love to share about this journey. It starts back in about 2012. My husband and I had a little 3-year-old girl and a newborn in the backseat of a car. And we drove past a theater, and on the theater, there was a marquee that said, Mrs. Utah, June something.
Mhm.
And my husband looked over at me and goes, you should do something like that. And I looked at him, I said, are you kidding? I am way beyond pageants. That is over. My life is over. I've given it to motherhood. Like, I'm out. But he planted a seed. And 10 years later,
Mhm.
10 years. I finished teaching a hip hop class, and I got out in my car and I was posting a picture of my hip hop class and saying how fun it was. And I heard in my head, Clarissa, it is time. And my brain flashed to that marquee, and I can still see it in the June, in the June sun, the summer sun. And I knew exactly what my body and brain were telling me, what I was very impressed to do. And God kind of opened doors for me to apply and run for the Mrs. Utah pageant.
Mhm.
And that journey has been one of incredible self-growth. If any woman ever wants to grow, or male, because I know they have male pageants. Like they have one in a couple of weeks that I'm actually a judge for, and I'm so excited. If you ever want self-growth, this is a great place for it, because not only do you have to know yourself, you have to be physically, taking care of your body, whatever that looks like. That can be different for everybody. You have to be able to show up for other people. Service is a big deal. Like how we present ourselves and show up for ourselves. Like it's incredible. So I ran, let's see, it's 25. I have to count backwards. In 21, I ran my first time, 21, 22, 23. No, 22 I did. 22, 23, 24, 25. And then I did an extra pageant this year in 25. So I ran for Mrs. Utah 4 times. And each time, or 3 times, I took runner up. And then one time, this very past March, I didn't even make top 8. And to not make top 8 after 4 years of working on how I walk, working on how I present myself, working on that's hard. That's hard. It's hard to actually go backwards in our progress, right? And so you have to really be grounded in who am I and what do I stand for? And do I know all the work I have done backstage? Yes, I do. That was a big deal. So I actually transferred out of the Utah pageant into the Continental Worldwide pageant. I explain pageants like this. There's McDonald's and Wendy's, and they both serve hamburgers, but they're both a little bit different. So here's the America program. Here's the Continental Worldwide program. They're the same thing. They're both pageants, but they just look a little bit different.
And I'm assuming the process and procedure and everything involved is relatively similar. Yeah.
So for example, for the America program, there is interview, evening gown, and swimsuit. And in the Continental Worldwide program, there's interview, evening gown, and fitness wear. And there's other pageants that will do interview, evening gown, and platform. There's, so there are so many different ways to create a contest of an all-around amazing woman. And that's technically what pageantry is. So I jumped over to this system. I ran in July of this year and was crowned Mrs. USA.
Well, I was thinking that must be what that crown was for.
Yep. And I was so peaceful that night when I won that my girls were like, Mom, you didn't even look like you were happy. And I said, I just knew I had done all the work.
Yeah.
And I knew it was where I needed to be. And I kind of let God take over. And I said, God, I put in all this work. I will do what you need me to do. And I'm okay going back to being just a mom or just a business owner, because I know who I am, and I know that a crown will not change that at all.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And in the end, it's not, it's not the only thing defining you for sure.
Yes.
But yeah.
Which is just like a disability.
It's true. Yeah.
It will not change who we are. as
Like
long
it's a
as
big
we
part of us, but
yes.
it's not who we are. You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
it truly is what can allow us actually greater superpowers than if we were just normal human beings.
Mm-hmm. That's really well said. That is, I think that's a really good note to end on. But I sure
That's
appreciate
great.
the time, Clarissa. I'm
Yes.
looking forward to sharing, everything that you talked about today. It's really been great to talk to you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, this was wonderful.
Yeah, and thanks so much for sharing, all of your advice and thoughts and everything that you've learned to manage. And I'm pretty sure that some people in the audience will hopefully gain a lot from
Yeah.
that. So
Thank you. The
thanks so
whole reason
much.
I share is my purpose and my mission is to make an impact on just one person that they will choose to be a builder, that they will
Mhm.
choose to make their mess their message.